Welcome back to Candy's Classic Game Shrine, everyone. I just finished a cross-country move from Seattle to New Jersey, and unfortunately during that time I missed being able to celebrate the Virtual Boy's 30th anniversary of release. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to bring you a video that talks about my favorite, most misunderstood console of all time. It's the very early 90s, and Alan Becker, from Massachusetts-based company Reflection Technology, walks into a boardroom with the heads of Nintendo. His company has been working since the 80s on a technology that allowed users to see in stereoscopic 3D through an eyepiece complete with head tracking. It was called the Private Eye. This wasn't the first time Reflection Technology had pitched the Private Eye, though. They had tried before in the past with Sega, Hasbro, Mattel, and many others with no success. This time was different, though. Armed with the Private Eye and their demo tank game, they pitched it to Nintendo, and by the end of the meeting, a licensing deal was struck. Little did they know, Gunpei Yokoi was one of the ones present and was one of the largest supporters of this technology. It was at this moment the idea of the Virtual Boy was conceived. Dubbed VR32 during development, the Virtual Boy was set to be Nintendo's latest leap in innovation in gaming. Nintendo assigned the VR32 to Nintendo's R&D 1 and put Gunpei Yokoi in charge of the project. This was mostly due to Gunpei Yokoi's ability to think outside of the box and innovate like he did with his handhelds, the Game & Watch, and the Game Boy. Nintendo had so much faith in the Virtual Boy that they went as far as to even set up a dedicated manufacturing facility in China to oversee the production of all of the units. The Virtual Boy spent 4 years total in development. During that time, the team experimented with many different concepts, such as smaller form factor, a pair of goggles that could be worn on the head, and full color screens. The reason Gunpei Yokoi stuck with the red and black display was because when they tinkered with color screens, users struggled to truly see the depth of the 3D. Aside from that, it would have gone against what Nintendo was trying to achieve with the console, and that was to keep it reasonably affordable. In the end, red was decided on because it was the Private Eye's original LED color, and it also produced the most crisp 3D image and gave the best perception of depth at the time. When toying around with the idea of head-worn goggles, initial tests showed that due to early head tracking technology, it caused motion sickness in some users, caused jittery images, and studies were starting to show that there was a potential risk to children under the age of 7 to develop lazy eye conditions if the device was not properly focused. This is why many users will report headaches when using the Virtual Boy. It tends to affect users with existing eye issues more than those without. Around the same time in 1995, Japan introduced the Product Liability Act of 1995. This imposed strict liability for defective products, holding manufacturers, importers, and processors liable for damages to life, body, or property. It also provided relief to consumers by allowing claims based on a product defect causing injury rather than actually requiring proof of manufacturer negligence or intent. The only way manufacturers could avoid liability was if the defect couldn't have been known with the available scientific and technical knowledge at the time of delivery. After learning all of this, Nintendo worked with the Shepens Eye Research Institute to design the Virtual Boy into what would eventually go into production. They were given guidelines on how to minimize risk and ultimately decided to eliminate the head tracking functionality. This is also the reason why you'll see warnings on the game boxes and at the startup of each Virtual Boy game. However, there really truly never was any real danger to the users. After working out the bugs, Nintendo wanted to flaunt their latest project. In 1994, Nintendo showcased the Virtual Boy prototype at Shoshinkai 1994, and later on, the New York Times was able to test it out and preview the system. It would later go on to be shown at CES and E3 in 1995 as the launch grew closer. The verdict from the shows were in. People were confused at the lack of a color screen, head tracking, and true immersive feel that the virtual in the Virtual Boy implied. They felt it was awkward to play and antisocial considering that even the Famicom and NES had multiplayer. Despite this, Nintendo projected an extremely bloated number of sales in Japan at 3 million hardware units and 14 million software units by the end of March of 1996. During this time, Nintendo was also working on their next home console. It was called the Ultra 64, what we now know as the Nintendo 64. This caused internal pressure between R&D 1 and R&D 2 as they competed for resources in order to get both projects out and out successfully. Gunpei Yokoi strongly voiced his opinion that the Virtual Boy was not ready for launch and needed more resources. He felt it needed more time and development to address concerns people had when the system was initially shown to the public. Despite his best efforts, Nintendo didn't care. The Ultra 64 was their new golden child, and they wanted all resources dedicated to it. Nintendo demanded that the Virtual Boy be ready for the July 21st, 1995 release date in Japan. In Japan, the release date came, and the Virtual Boy's price tag was 200 yen, or 423 USD in today's money. While less expensive than the color version would have been, it was still a very expensive price tag for a half-baked system. People expected a somewhat traditional Mario game, like what was demoed previously, but instead were given Mario's Tennis and some other titles. This is because during development of the Virtual Boy, Nintendo president at the time, Hiroshi Yamauchi, insisted that Yokoi put very little emphasis on Mario on the Virtual Boy. He wanted to reserve the hype for a new Mario game for the upcoming Nintendo 64. In my opinion, this is one of many fatal mistakes with the system. There's no reason why the two could not have coexisted. Other issues that arose were how media latched on to the warnings about eyesight and children under 7 using the Virtual Boy. This was only fuel to add to the video games are bad fire that was currently burning in Japan. Without looking at the studies and actually reading the warnings for what they were, media condemned the system by declaring it bad for a player's eyes. In an effort to do better in sales, Nintendo lowered the price in Japan, but it did little difference. The Virtual Boy left the gate in Japan limping, and things weren't going to get much better in the land of the rising sun. It was now August 14th, 1995, and it was North America's turn to get their hands on the Virtual Boy. It launched at $179, which is about $382 in today's money, and it came out with 4 launch titles. Mario's Tennis was the pack-in game, however, Telro Boxer, Red Alarm, and Galactic Pinball were also available separately. Mario's Tennis is pretty self-explanatory. It's Mario and his buddies playing tennis. Telro Boxer was a first-person boxing game where you boxed mech-style robots. Red Alarm is best described as a Star Fox-style game without the storyline or characters, and Galactic Pinball is a Metroid-inspired pinball game. While there's nothing wrong with any of these games, I feel that Telro Boxer was the only one to showcase the potential of the system in the best manner. It was one of the few games to ever give that virtual feel to the games that most people expected when the system launched. The fact that people got a Mario sports game as a pack-in title also likely gave the impression that Nintendo didn't believe in the system enough to give it its own Mario title, thus lessening people's own confidence in the system. To try and boost sales, Nintendo of America partnered with Blockbuster to allow people to rent the Virtual Boy and even brought the purchase price of them down. In Japan, sales were still abysmal. No matter what Nintendo tried, they could not boost the sales. The number of units sold in Japan plateaued at about 140,000, a far cry from the millions of units projected to sell. On December 22nd, 1995, the president of Nintendo formally pulled the plug on the Virtual Boy in Japan. He wanted to save every resource he could and place them into the Nintendo 64. Over in North America, things were doing a little better for the Virtual Boy, but that wasn't saying much. Americans enjoyed the novelty of the Virtual Boy at first, but it wore off quickly when other options like the PS1 and the N64 were available. Not even a dramatic price drop from $180 to $99 could save the system, though. Nintendo of America saw the writing on the wall when Toys R Us would have them in clearance bins for as little as $30. In August of 1996, just 6 months to a year of existence, depending on the region, the Virtual Boy quietly faded away. Contrary to popular belief, Gunpei Yokoi wasn't fired from Nintendo for the Virtual Boy's failure or poor reception. He had planned on retiring from Nintendo right before the Virtual Boy project was handed to him anyway. The failure of the Virtual Boy was not his reason for leaving. He wanted something new for himself and was disappointed in how Nintendo handled the Virtual Boy project. Before parting with Nintendo and creating the Bandai WonderSwan, he helped Nintendo develop and create the Game Boy Pocket. He would tragically die in a car accident in 1997, leaving behind a legacy that will never be forgotten. The Virtual Boy would only ever get a total of 22 titles between North America and Japan, with several titles remaining exclusive to each region. Europe and the rest of the world never got a chance to try it. It was such a failure to Nintendo that they didn't see the point in a global launch. So many games were discovered to have been planned or in development but never saw the light of day. We are still discovering more and more as recently as a few months ago in 2025. Years later, after it was discontinued, a small group of people that loved the system never let their passion die. Keeping their consoles or finding used ones secondhand, they slowly built up a community where they could share stories, troubleshoot issues they had, and discuss any and all things related to the Virtual Boy. Over time, more of us crawled out of the woodwork and realized we weren't the only crazy ones. Finding community in the group, we all pooled our skills and resources together to do amazing things. 30 years later, the community has worked together to create databases of promotional materials, games, source codes, serial numbers, and more. Some of the larger accomplishments of the community is uncovering and getting their hands on unreleased prototype games and dumping and sharing them with the public for free. Such examples are Baseball, Bound High, and Virtual League Baseball 2. Besides preservation, the community heavily focuses on homebrew games and accessories for the Virtual Boy. The library of the Virtual Boy has more than doubled in size thanks to the homebrew community and their skills at coding, artwork, music, and more. You'll find a range of homebrew from very basic to super polished but enjoyable either way. Other things the community has created are flashcards, replacement ribbon cables, cart programmers and dumping devices, a 2-player link cable, development/game engines, emulators, rumble packs, and so much more. The community is forever evolving and growing, but the one thing that's remained the same throughout my time in it is everyone makes you feel welcomed or part of one big family. My time in the community started in 2009 or so when I got my first Virtual Boy. I was immediately welcomed and helped out. The folks in the forum were the main reason I created the Virtual Girl. We all would joke around and say that Nintendo missed the opportunity to make a girl version of the system to market to girls. That same joke that I made into a reality is also the reason I've met and befriended some of the most amazing people. This little failure has done so much despite everything. I hope to see more and more people appreciate the Virtual Boy in the future. They don't need to love or obsess over it like I do, but I want them to see it as something more than just a red and black headache. Hopefully, with the Virtual Boy coming to the Nintendo Switch Online, it'll help foster a greater appreciation for it. Although the regurgitation of myths about the system have already begun to flood social media. Only time will tell how this plays out. It's easy for many people to write off the Virtual Boy as a failure with no redeeming qualities other than being the butt of a joke. But when you stop to think about it, it couldn't be further from the truth. Every true success is born of failure. Had it not been for the Virtual Boy and Nintendo taking the risk, we likely would have never had the Nintendo 3DS, the Oculus, or any other VR headset that we have today. Was the Virtual Boy perfect? Absolutely not. However, it was perfectly flawed, and we should be giving it way more appreciation. Well, that was my retrospective of the Nintendo Virtual Boy and its 30th anniversary. Let me know if you learned anything, or just let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, guys, take care.